Hi there, welcome to the DFS build again. We did MLB earlier today, and we're knocking out the tiniest NBA slate of all time. 2 games tonight, players only. It should be fun and also horrible. Actually, I don't even care about NBA that much because MLB opening day is here, but we do have 2 games. Taylor, let's jump right into it. First, by the way, we are using the DFS Hero projections. If you want to try out a new lineup optimizer, they're a pretty good one. Give it a shot, 15% off if you use the link below in the video description. All right, no more time to be wasted. Boston at Atlanta, huge 16.5-point favorites. This game does have a really nice 226.5 total. It's the highest of this tiny slate. That spread feels gross. I guess DeJounte Murray is questionable. How do you feel about this game, and specifically on the Boston side, who do you like?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a good spot. Atlanta's a pace-up team that doesn't play a whole lot of defense, and I think Atlanta's on a back-to-back. So good spot on paper, I guess, for Boston, but I'm really not getting to a lot of this team. They do have injury news, though. Let's see. Do you know offhand who's questionable?
Drew and Al Horford are questionable. Those are the ones that matter the most. Xavier Tillman is also questionable, not really as prevalent, but with Horford out, I guess it's kind of worth noting because Cornette could be viable off the bench if that's the case. And obviously the starting lineup could fluctuate. But yeah, I mean, it's just the spread is so massive. And like you said, if you're gravitating away from this game because of that, I'm starting to think that stacking this game on a 2-game slate actually has a lot of appeal. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm not gravitating away from the game. I mean, it's a 2-game slate. I just meant Boston in terms of all 4 teams. Boston's the one that is the hardest to get to based on the salaries and stuff. But obviously, if Holiday is out, that will make things a little more interesting. Horford also sitting would make things a little more interesting. As of now, Tatum and Brown, obviously the standouts. Porzingis, to an extent, looks fine as well. They're just kind of priced around where they're always priced. Derek White at 7.6, I have minimal interest in, but if Drew Holiday sits, he's going to look better. Peyton Pritchard again, going to be a decent value, still under 6K. Minutes have been there for him lately. It's kind of a wait and see thing. Certainly no qualms getting to Tatum or Brown, but as things stand, I'm prioritizing stuff somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on how ownership shakes out. It's the best DFS environment of this small slate, and the blowout risk is going to scare people away. Plus, Giannis is in the other game, and Zion is worth mentioning too. So I actually really like the idea of stacking this game and from both sides and going up and getting Jason Tatum. I don't know if I'm going to cram him and Jalen in necessarily, but I think anything's on the table if it's going to be remotely contrarian. Let me just check the overall ownership right now. Yeah, I mean, Giannis is the chalk stud, and Zion's coming at 45%, which obviously just means naturally the Boston guys worth paying up for, Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, and even White, like you said, those guys are going to possibly be a little bit lower owned than they're coming in right now, and that is intriguing to me. The problem is DeJounte Murray's questionable, and the spread is really big, which kind of could be hinting that he's not going to play. I can't imagine. Yeah, I know it's Boston and Atlanta, but it's still on the road. Like, I would imagine if he was for sure in, it would be closer to like 12 or 13. It just wouldn't be this thick of a spread, I don't think. But yeah, so as far as value goes, if Horford and Drew are out, are you looking at Pritchard? Are you looking at Sam Hauser? Do you like Cornette at all?
Cornette, if Horford's out, maybe. But if he's off the bench, it's such a small slate that you can really play anyone and hope for the best. Maybe not Xavier Tillman just because his per minute number's been bad. The role's not really there. But yeah, like Cornette and Pritchard are fine if they open up. Hauser is okay. Whenever Hauser's getting ownership, that's something I generally steer clear from. And by default, he might tonight just because it's a 2-gamer. But yeah, I mean, you can cycle through pretty much anyone there depending on the injury news.
Yeah, so, I mean, Pritchard is probably the key value that I'd be pointing to if Drew is indeed out. Like you said, since it's 2 games, you really can argue for anyone. But I just think if this game is going to be low-owned, I'm stacking it up. On the other side are the Hawks. Obviously, DeJounte Murray looks good even with a possible blowout risk. He is questionable. How do you feel about him if he's in, and how do you feel about the Hawks if he's out?
If he's in, he's probably right there with Zion as like the best play on the slate. 9.6, he's priced up, but for the role, not necessarily. He's at 1.55 DK points per minute with Young, Sadiq Bey, Okongwu, and Jalen Johnson out of the lineup. Just getting all the usage. He looks fantastic to me if he's in. If he's out, it's going to be gross, but I assume Trent Forrest becomes kind of a viable super punt here. Might become the most popular player on the slate, which is cause for pause, but he's 3-1, and there's not really value on the slate, so it is what it is. As of now, getting to a lot of Bit Krejci just because he's starting in 4K. Played 30 minutes or more in 3 straight games. Not a comfortable value, especially if he's going to be owned by half the field, but again, tiny slate, you kind of have to do what you got to do. Hunter and Bogdanovich, solid mid-range plays. Ditto for Capella. Bruno Fernando, again, as the backup center, has a solid role, cheap, good per minute guy. Don't mind that. Yeah, there's a lot to consider. Even Dylan Windler, potentially, if Murray sits, I guess you can punt with that 3K flat.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel. I like stacking this game just because if it's 2 games, you got to get leverage somehow and take your chance. And that's just the chance I personally would be taking. If DeJounte is out, I would kind of lean away from maybe the vets. Like I wouldn't go heavy with Boggy and Clint at that point. But the other values, like there's no real reason for them to limit the minutes on Krejci or, I mean, it feels gross, but Forrest, Windler, Matthews, and Bruno. Bruno's good value anyways. But like if it is going to blow out and DeJounte ends up sitting or ends up playing but being limited because of the blowout, all this value is still super viable even if that happens. All right, next game at Milwaukee and Pels. Obviously, if we're just being logical, this is the game you would want to stack. Like if we had a lot more games, I think I'd be more likely to get to it and like force my way there. The only problem is it's going to be pretty chalky. Zion and Giannis are understandably, rightfully very owned right now. But there is some logic to not using them. Like Giannis is facing a Pels defense that is top 5 as far as not allowing a lot of points inside the paint. So I don't think that necessarily means Giannis can't go off. Obviously, he can do that in any matchup, but it's worth noting. He does lead the slate with a 29% boom rate. I'm pretty sure he is the highest one. Let's see. Yeah, he does. So I mean, it's Giannis. I don't really have to sell him that much. So how are you feeling about Giannis? Are you going to go over on it's coming at 33% right now for ownership? Are you going to go over on that? And are there any other bucks that you feel like you're going to get to?
I have him about 35% now, so pretty even with the field. I think that's fine. He's 11K, obviously the top overall play, but I mentioned Murray. We're going to talk about Zion, CJ, and there's a lot of good mid-range stuff on the slate, so I don't think paying up for him is a total must. Like you said, kind of a mediocre matchup too on paper. I don't mind taking shots on Portis and Lopez in this game just because the Pelicans allow the second most 3-point attempts per game in the league this season. Portis and Lopez are pretty perimeter-oriented bigs generally, especially Lopez. So both are cheap. Portis in particular, very good per minute, still has a decent roll off the bench. Lopez is 5K flat. I think that's cheap enough to get to, certainly compared to Joe Val. Lopez has a far safer minutes role, even if he's not a good per minute guy. Middleton's okay. Not really prioritizing him or Dame. Don't think the prices are wrong, but on this particular slate, I just think there's better stuff to make priorities.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. Dame just has not been that dude lately, and he's pushing 9K here. I do think he's a little bit viable based on your point about the 3-point attempts. I mean, he's going to chuck too, so he could easily get hot and be a pretty good leverage play on Giannis. Right now, he's coming in with half the ownership, so that could be interesting. I don't personally love Dame tonight, but there is that logic, and I don't hate it, I guess. I will note to double down on your point with Brooke and Bobby. They both got 30-plus fantasy points the last time they played the Pels. Brooke hit 6 threes. So, I mean, I think the logic is pretty sound there. They're pretty decent mid-range guys, and Brooke especially, 5K flat, like you said. My goodness. For this slate, that feels way too cheap, honestly. I was looking at Chris. Yeah, Bobby 5.8. That's good, too. Chris Middleton's okay at 6.6. I don't think I'd go with the value here with the Bucks, but worth noting that Pat Bev is questionable for this game. Let's see, double check. No, he's probable now. Never mind. So I guess Pat Bev at 3.8 would be okay. 15, 20 minutes. I don't know. I guess I would just not go to the Bucks for the value. I'd mostly be looking at, we got Pels value and Hawks value for the most part on this slate. But yeah, it's not a team I'm really forcing my way to based off of Giannis's ownership up top, but they do look totally fine for this slate. On the other side are the Pels. Zion leads the way. 45% ownership. CJ McCollum come with 60% ownership. Trey Murphy with 51. So obviously the ownership is super, super heavy on the Pels, which it's logical. It does make sense. It's 2 games. But is there any reason that you would want to be underweight on these guys, and which guys stand out the most for you?
I will not be underweight on CJ or Zion. I think I'll be, well, actually, I'm a little under on Zion, but I'm over on CJ at the moment just because no Jose Alvarado means there's no real backup point guard for them. So he could play 40 minutes in theory if the game's close. McCollum gets a usage boost anyway with Ingram out, so he's a great play. I think a good leverage play on Murphy is Herb Jones for 1,100 less. Jones should see mid-30s minutes. Given the Bucks wing offensive players, I think they'll need his defense. So not great per minute, but the role should be there for him. Not to say I don't like Murphy. I think he's a solid play too, of course, starting for Ingram. Jordan Hawkins and Najee Marshall could see a few more minutes with Alvarado out. Hawkins in particular at 3-2. Not a comfortable play, not a certain guy to get minutes, but he's cheap enough to where I think you can take flyers on that on this slate just because it's a 2-gamer and it is what it is. Valanciunas, Larry Nance, not really interested in either. I think Nance is the better play just because the minutes have been higher lately, but there's a lot of fragility with both of them at this point.
That's very true. How do you explain the basically double ownership on JV over Nance here? I don't really understand that because Nance is getting a lot more minutes and he's cheaper, and they project pretty.
Just Joe Val's a way better per minute guy, I'm assuming, but I don't know. I'd much rather play Lopez than either of them.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I do like Larry at 4.2. I'm not super interested in Valanciunas just based on the role he's been having. So I definitely, especially with that ownership, he's coming at almost 29% ownership. I would definitely go Larry over JV, and I'm with you on, I'd go Brook over JV for sure too. Obviously the Pels are really good plays. I would just kind of pick your spots here because, I mean, you can't just, I don't think you can just stack Pels and that's going to work out. I think you got to fade the right Pel here. I don't really have an answer for that necessarily. I do like the call on Herbert Jones being a leverage play on a 6.2 Trey Murphy though. Trey Murphy got 39 minutes last game. He's a good play by himself, no doubt about it, but he is 1.1K more expensive, and he's going to be considerably more owned, 51% to 33% right now. But it looks like everybody on this team is garnering ownership, and that's why, because I'm going to do one lineup, it's 2 games, I'm more focused on MLB today, I'm probably just going to do the opposite of what the field is doing for the most part. All right, that does it for us for the game-by-game breakdown. That's what happens when there's only 2 games. Real quick, as far as boom ratings go on this slate, Giannis leads the way. Why is it not? Okay, Giannis leads the way with 29%. Zion's right behind with 25%. If you had to build around one player tonight, who's the guy that you're locking into your lineups?
It is CJ McCollum because I think he's going to play 40 minutes, and the Bucks have struggled against kind of high-usage guards all year. So happy to play him even at high ownership.
Yeah, a little bit of revenge there against his old teammate, Dame Lillard, too. All right, as far as ownership goes, okay, you're eating that mega chalk, CJ McCollum, no problem with that, 60%. Sometimes you just got to eat the good chalk. I'm with you on there. Trey Murphy, though, second with 51%. That might be where I start going away and look at that leverage play you're talking about, Herbert Jones. Is there anybody else here as far as high ownership that makes you think twice and maybe you'd go underweight or get off of him completely?
I think you can possibly consider fully fading Vit Krejci if he's going to be owned by nearly half the field. If it costs you Giannis, then I think that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make and just kind of build a more balanced team. And instead of taking a really gross potential dive just to kind of cram more studs in there, I think a balanced build is not a bad path.
Right. The funny thing is he is out there for 30-plus minutes, and he's 4K, so he's allowing you to get whatever stud you want up top, basically. In this case, it'd probably be Giannis. But very likely to get you like 10 to 15 fantasy points. So him is not as scary as people might think. And I'm with you.
It's like Patty Mills. Like
Yeah.
Patty Mills can really only hurt you if you play him. Like if he does well, he's still getting you like 15. You're not really thrilled with that anyway, you know?
Right. I do like the price point, but Clint Capella would probably be the other one that stands out for me, just because there's major blowout risk. He's 40% owned, and like you said, Brooks there. You got the Pels centers. I just don't think he's completely necessary, and at that ownership, I'd probably get away from him. But yeah, that does it for this breakdown. Hopefully it helps you out. If it does, give this video a like, and also consider subscribing to our channel, The DFS Build. It's also MLB opening day, so be sure to check out our video for that. Thanks for watching, and good luck.